She'll find me for fishing, so I bought the lake and banned the entire neighborhood. There's something sacred about fishing at dawn. The mist rising from the lake, the soft plop of the line hitting the water, birds just starting to stir. It's the kind of peace you don't mess with. I was sitting on my favorite rock by the edge of the water, coffee in hand, breathing in the earthy scent of dew and algae, when the tranquility shattered like glass under a boot. "Excuse me, sir," came the shrill voice from behind me. I turned, and instantly felt my stomach tighten. There she was, Brenda Claremont, president of our neighborhood HOA, marching toward me with her clipboard like she was leading a SWAT team. Her lips were pursed so tight I thought she might actually implode. "I'm issuing you a citation for unauthorized recreational activity on HOA-controlled property," she said, thrusting a slip of paper into my hand. I blinked. "What the hell are you talking about?" She didn't even flinch. "Section 4.3b of the HOA bylaws clearly prohibits fishing in the lake without prior written approval." I stared at the fine. $500 for fishing in the lake that sits right behind my own damn backyard. "You're serious?" I asked, dumbfounded. "Dead serious," she replied, spinning on her heel like she'd just delivered a court sentence. I watched her walk away, heart-pounding rage simmering just beneath the surface. Fishing was how I recharged, how I remembered my dad, how I stayed sane. And now some clipboard tyrant thought she could take that from me? They thought they could find me off the lake? Oh, no, they had no idea who they were messing with, and I was just getting started. I've always believed that a man should fight for his peace, and mine was that lake. I'm a contractor by trade. Nothing fancy. I build things, fix things. Work sunup to sundown most days, hands calloused, back sore, but there's pride in it. When I finally scraped together enough to buy my dream home, a cozy 2-story place nestled right on the edge of a serene lake, I thought I'd made it. Not in some flashy, Instagram perfect kind of way. I mean in the real soul-deep sense. The kind of made it where you pour a cup of coffee, sit on your back porch, and just breathe. The lake was the selling point. Crystal clear water, gentle breezes, frogs croaking at night, and best of all, it backed right up to my yard. No need to drive anywhere or haul gear. I could fish whenever I wanted, just like I used to with my dad when I was a kid. He's gone. Now, cancer got him too fast, too soon. But the lake brought him back to me in quiet ways. Every cast I made, every tug on the line. It felt like we were back on that rickety old dock again, him showing me how to tie knots, how to wait. Patience is the difference between fishing and just standing by water, he'd say. The neighborhood seemed perfect at first, too. Tight-knit, peaceful. Folks waved, barbecues happened on weekends, kids rode bikes without worry. But there was always a little shadow in paradise, the HOA Homeowners Association. The 3 letters that start as a whisper and end as a threat. At first, they were just background noise. Monthly emails, occasional reminders about trimming bushes or clearing leaves. I ignored them like most people do, until the letters got personal. The first warning was about my grass being an inch too long. Not a jungle, just a little lush. Then came the complaint about my mailbox. Apparently, matte black wasn't in keeping with the aesthetic tone of the neighborhood. Are you kidding me? That's when I met her. Brenda Claremont, HOA president. Middle-aged, always in pastel cardigans, a Bluetooth headset practically glued to her ear. She walked like every sidewalk was hers and spoke like every word came with a legal disclaimer. Brenda didn't enforce rules. She lived them. Breathed them, probably had the bylaws printed on her bedroom walls. The way she spoke to people, condescending, clipped, and somehow always one step from a threat, made even the most seasoned residents flinch. Still, I kept my head down. I cut the grass, repainted the mailbox, picked my battles. Fishing was sacred, and as long as I had that, I could let the rest slide. But Brenda didn't want peace. She wanted obedience, control. And I was about to become her next project. The first few skirmishes were small. Letters, passive-aggressive notes, even a neighbor sheepishly mentioning that Brenda had asked about how often I fished. I laughed. Get off. What could she possibly do? Turns out quite a bit. But she underestimated one thing. I don't like bullies, never have, and she just picked the wrong guy with the wrong hobby at the wrong time, because this wasn't just a home to me. It was my sanctuary, and I'd burn her whole petty kingdom to the ground before I let her take it away. It was one of those crisp Saturday mornings where the world feels like it's holding its breath, the kind where the air still carries a bite. The birds are slow to sing, and the lake is as smooth as glass. After a brutal week filled with busted pipes, 2 missed inspections, and a subcontractor who forgot to show up, I needed this. I slid out of bed before sunrise, grabbed my rod, a thermos of strong black coffee, and headed straight for the dock behind my house. The planks creaked under my boots like they always did, a sound that comforted me more than any morning news ever could. I cast my line, watched the ripples stretch, and leaned back with a satisfied sigh. For 20 glorious minutes it was perfect. No emails, no phone calls. Just me, the water, and the slow lull of peace crawling back into my bones. Then came the golf cart. I didn't pay it much mind at first. HOA folks were always driving around pretending to be busy. But when it veered off the main trail and bounced down the grassy incline toward my dock, I sat up a little straighter. Out stepped Brenda, of course, flanked by 2 HOA board members I'd seen at meetings but never spoken to. All 3 wore matching navy windbreakers with the HOA emblem stitched over their hearts, as if they were some kind of lake patrol unit. Sir? Brenda began, adjusting her sunglasses even though the sun wasn't up yet. I'm afraid we need to speak with you. I stood, rod still in hand. About what? Unauthorized use of HOA resources, fishing in the community lake without a permit. I blinked. A permit? She handed me a printed citation, laminated, with my name already typed on it. The fine, $500, the offense, recreational use of HOA-maintained property without prior authorization. You've got to be kidding me, I said, jaw tightening. The HOA doesn't maintain the lake. I mow my own yard right up to the edge. I've never seen a single HOA crew out here. That's beside the point. One of the board members chimed in, puffing up like he mattered. It's under our jurisdiction, and repeated offenses may result in additional fines or revocation of community privileges. I looked around in disbelief. The lake that my own deck overlooked, the water I could spit into from my back porch. Now suddenly they were claiming ownership over it. This is harassment, I said, folding the citation and shoving it in my back pocket. You can't fine me for fishing in my own backyard. Brenda smiled, not with warmth, but with the smugness of someone who thinks they've just outmaneuvered. You can appeal it at the next board meeting. Good luck with that. They turned and left as quickly as they came, bouncing away in their ridiculous little cart while I stood frozen, rod still in hand, coffee forgotten. The rage didn't hit all at once. It came in waves. Disbelief first, then humiliation, then that slow, hot burn that creeps up your neck and makes your fists clench before you even realize it. I spent the rest of the morning pacing. I called a couple neighbors, folks I'd shared drinks and laughs with not too long ago, and got nothing but awkward hesitations. Well, the HOA does have a lot of power. I mean, rules are rules, right? I don't want to get involved. That one hurt. I saw a few others peeking through their blinds when I stormed back inside with the citation in hand, whispering behind hedges, avoiding my eye at the mailbox. Like I had done something wrong. That was the moment it shifted. This wasn't about a fine anymore. It wasn't even about the lake. It was about control. They thought they could push me around, slap me with absurd violations, and watch me fold. Like everyone else? Nah, not me. They wanted a war? Fine, I'd bring them one. By Monday morning, the fine was pinned to my fridge with a magnet shaped like a fish. Ironic, really. And I was still stewing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. Brenda and her little HOA goons barked about jurisdiction, like they were judge, jury, and executioner. But I'd lived long enough to know that people like her often counted on others not asking questions. So I did the one thing they never expected. I started digging. First stop, the county records office. A squat brick building that smelled like mildew and bureaucracy. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like an angry hive, flickering just enough to make my head throb. The receptionist barely looked up when I asked for property maps and land ownership files. She slid a clipboard across the desk with a sigh, like she'd done it 1,000 times already that day. Lake behind Marigold Estates, I asked. She chewed her gum slowly. Lake off parcel 214B? We've had folks asking about that one lately. Hold on. After 20 minutes and a short trip through a back archive that looked like it hadn't seen sunlight since the Nixon era, I found what I was looking for: a crumbling map, folded and refolded to death, and a stack of property boundary documents that made my eyes cross. But then I saw it. A thin, wavy blue line labeled Unincorporated Water Body, Summer 38, and next to it, Owner, Aldridge Holdings, LLC. No mention of the HOA. No tie to the neighborhood at all. The lake was never officially handed over during the development phase. Apparently a clerical oversight when the property lines were redrawn decades ago. As far as the county was concerned, it was private land, owned by a company that hadn't touched it in years. I stared at the records in stunned silence, adrenaline prickling under my skin. Brenda and her smug little club didn't own the lake. They had no right to find me. No authority at all. They were bluffing. And now I had proof. I scribbled down the listed business address, which led me to a local law firm downtown. After a couple calls and a voicemail or two, I got in touch with a senior partner named Gregory Aldridge. Turns out the LLC wasn't even active anymore. Just a dormant holding company his grandfather had used for leftover property after some commercial deals fell through. I didn't even know we still had that lake, he said with a chuckle over the phone. What a mess. Would you be willing to sell it? I asked, heart pounding. There was a pause. Sure, it's just sitting there, nothing but a liability. If you're serious, I'll have my office draw something up. How much are we talking? He laughed. Honestly, just cover the back taxes and filing fees. It's more of a nuisance than an asset at this point. I could hardly believe it. In a matter of days, I went from being fined for casting a line to potentially owning the very lake the HOA was trying to control. I ended the call with a stunned smile, barely able to sit still. This wasn't just luck. This was destiny tapping me on the shoulder and whispering, "Go get 'em!" The HOA wanted a fight? I was about to buy the battlefield, and then I'd bury them with it. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and barely contained anticipation. I'd played it cool on the phone with Gregory Aldridge, but inside I was buzzing like a live wire. I couldn't believe it was really happening, that I, a guy who just wanted to fish in peace, was about to own the lake everyone in the neighborhood thought belonged to the HOA. Gregory agreed to meet in person to finalize the sale. His office was tucked into the top floor of an aging brick building downtown, right above a struggling insurance agency and a coffee shop that smelled more like burnt toast than espresso. He greeted me with a handshake that told me everything I needed to know. Firm, no nonsense, but tired. He was in his late 60s, maybe older, with the kind of face that looked like it had seen one too many spreadsheets and HOA meetings of his own. Frankly, he said as he slid a folder across his cluttered desk, I've been meaning to offload this property for years. No real access, no utility, and nothing but tax forms. You're doing me a favor. Happy to do it, I said, flipping through the paperwork, trying not to let my hands shake. The sale price was a steal, low enough that I could cover it with a mix of personal savings and a dip into my emergency fund. It wasn't a small decision. That money was meant for a new roof, maybe a long overdue vacation. But this felt bigger than shingles or sandy beaches. This was about principle, about power, about never letting someone like Brenda Claremont yank my peace out from under me again. You sure about this? Gregory asked, half smiling. It's just a lake. Not to me, I said. He nodded once, then slid the final page across the Table. I signed it with a cheap plastic pen that barely worked, and just like that, it was done. I walked out of that office with a manila envelope under my arm, the ink still drying on the deed. I don't know what I expected. A parade, maybe. Fireworks. But instead, the world just kept moving. People passed me on the sidewalk like nothing had changed. But I knew better. The next morning, I stood on the edge of the dock, just as the sun began to climb over the water. The air was still, the lake mirroring the sky in hues of gold and soft blue. I held the deed in my hand, heavy with meaning. My lake. Mine. I let out a slow breath, letting the feeling settle into my bones. Own the water Brenda tried to weaponize against me. I owned the very thing she used to humiliate me in front of my neighbors. But revenge? That needed finesse. See, I wasn't going to storm the next HOA meeting waving the deed like a lunatic. I wasn't going to scream from rooftops or gloat to neighbors still picking sides. No, I was going to be methodical. I spent the next week planning. I consulted a property lawyer to make sure I had every legal right nailed down. I installed a few discreet private property no trespassing signs along the lake's edge, just to see if the HOA would notice. And I waited. Oh, I waited. Let them think they'd won. Let them issue their smug little newsletters and sip their HOA-approved coffee from matching mugs. Let Brenda polish her clipboard and pretend she still ran the show, because a storm was coming, and the water that once belonged to all of them, now it belonged to me, and I was about to show them exactly what happens when you try to drown a man in his own backyard. They brought the fight to me. Now I was going to own the battlefield, literally. It started with the signs. Simple, clean, and impossible to misinterpret. Private property, no trespassing, trespassers will be prosecuted. I had them posted every 20 feet along the lake's edge, professionally printed, bolted into, treated wooden posts, the whole 9 yards. Not cheap, but this wasn't about cost. It was about message. The moment they went up, the neighborhood buzzed like a kicked beehive. I spotted Brenda across the street the next morning, standing frozen in her pastel tracksuit, jaw slack, HOA newsletter in hand, eyes locked on one of my signs like it was a personal insult carved into stone. Then came the paperwork. I sent official, cease and desist letters to every member of the HOA board, certified mail, return receipt requested. Each one came with a copy of the deed, the updated county-registered land survey, and a friendly but firm legal notice. Any future use of the lake by HOA members or guests would be considered trespassing. I even included a clause clarifying that the HOA had no legal claim or oversight of the lake, and that all prior communications regarding lake access were to be immediately retracted. The silence didn't last long. The next HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, just like always. Except this time the crowd was twice as large. I walked in fashionably late, wearing my best boots and a smirk I couldn't quite hide. The room went quiet. I saw neighbors whispering, shifting uncomfortably. Brenda sat at the head of the table, flanked by her board, red-faced, shuffling. Papers like they might find some clause to save her. She cleared her throat, lips tight. It has come to our attention that certain residents have taken actions to restrict lake access. This is, of course, unacceptable. I raised my hand calmly. You mean the lake I own? A murmur rippled through the crowd. You may believe. You own it, she snapped. But the HOA has historical jurisdiction. I pulled the deed from my folder and slapped it on the table in front of her. This is from the county registrar. You're welcome to take a photo. Brenda looked at it like it was a bomb. Her hand trembled just slightly as she picked it up, reading it over, her eyes scanning for some kind of loophole. There must be some mistake, she hissed, cheeks flushing. We've always managed that lake. You thought you did, I said, leaning forward, voice low but clear. You built your little kingdom on land you never owned. Now you're trespassing. She stood up so fast her chair screeched across the floor. This is outrageous. I'm calling the HOA attorney. Do that, I said. Just know that every hour they spend on this is costing you and your board money, and I'm not the one footing that bill. Her tantrum was the stuff of legend. She stormed out of the room after 10 more minutes of shouting and finger-pointing, the rest of the board trailing behind her like deflated balloons. The best part? I wasn't done yet. That weekend, the neighborhood threw its annual Summer on the Lake celebration. They'd planned it months ago. Bouncy houses, potluck, even rented paddle boats and a stage for live music. I waited until the very last minute to make my move. Just as the first kids started splashing into the water, I walked down to the dock with 2 uniformed police officers and my lawyer in tow. I didn't say a word. The officers did all the talking. Bye. The time the announcement was made, that the event was being shut down due to illegal use of private property, Brenda looked like she might actually pass out. I almost felt bad when she tried to argue, only for one of the officers to explain, quite calmly, that if she didn't vacate the property, she'd be arrested for trespassing, in front of everyone. Dozens of neighbors watched in stunned silence. As the cops escorted her off the dock, one of the board members tried to follow, and promptly got hit with a citation for unlawful assembly. The party fizzled instantly. Parents packed up, vendors left in a hurry, and for the first time ever, the lake was empty on a summer afternoon. I stood there, arms crossed, deed in my back pocket, watching it all unfold. The reaction from the community was split. Some neighbors avoided me entirely after that, crossing the street to dodge eye contact, whispering behind hedges like they were afraid I'd find them next. But others? They pulled me aside quietly in the following days. About time someone knocked them down a peg. You did what we all wanted to do. I didn't know you had it in you. Respect. They treated me differently now. Not exactly like a friend. Not quite like a threat, more like a warning. I wasn't just the guy with the fishing pole anymore. I was the man who bought the lake out from under their feet. And they knew, from here on out, I played by my own rules. It was a Saturday morning, not unlike the one that started it all. The sun was rising slow over the lake, casting warm streaks of gold across the still water. The air was cool and quiet, the kind of silence that sinks into your bones and makes you forget there's a world beyond the trees. I sat at the edge of the dock with my fishing rod in hand, a thermos of hot coffee by my side. The soft creak of the wood beneath me the only sound for miles. I smiled. This was my lake now. No HOA clipboard, no barking orders, no surprise fines stuffed into my mailbox. Just me, the water, and the peaceful echo of my own thoughts. I cast my line gently into the lake and leaned back. The bobber danced on the surface like it always had. But now every ripple felt different. Every cast was a reminder of the journey, from humiliation to ownership, from being pushed around to taking control. They tried to make me feel small, powerless, like I didn't belong. Instead, I bought the very thing they used to punish me, and took it away from them. Now their lakefronts were ghost towns. No barbecues, no noisy HOA-sponsored lake socials. Just silence. You could almost feel the resentment radiating from the trimmed hedges and vinyl fences. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of kids standing on the other side of those fences, watching longingly, fishing poles in hand, never allowed past the boundary, line their own board created. It wasn't their fault, but I didn't start this war. Brenda, of course, resigned from the HOA shortly after her public meltdown. Word had it she moved to a retirement community upstate. Couldn't take the shame. Couldn't stand the view. Good. This wasn't the revenge people expected. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It wasn't some big explosion or dramatic confrontation. It was quiet, a slow burn. The kind that doesn't make headlines but lingers. The kind they have to live with day after day, every time they look out at the water they thought was theirs. And remember that it isn't. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is letting people stew in their own arrogance, letting them see what they lost, and knowing they'll never get it back. I took a long sip of coffee, the steam rising as the sun climbed higher. I gave the reel a soft tug and felt a bite, a good one. I grinned. This lake? It's mine. And I never had to say a single word. I just let the silence speak for me. Looking back now, it's funny how one absurd fine turned into a full-blown war, and then into one of the most satisfying victories of my life. I didn't set out to pick a fight. I just wanted peace. A simple Saturday by the lake, a line in the water, and maybe a little quiet after a long week. But sometimes, standing up for yourself means stepping into the storm. And sometimes, it means becoming the storm. The whole ordeal taught me a lot about the dangers of unchecked power, about how people like Brenda wrap themselves in rules and policies to feel important, to feel bigger than they are. But most of all, it taught me that no one has the right to take your peace from you, not without a fight. I'm grateful now, in a strange way, grateful for every petty complaint, every fine, every passive-aggressive newsletter. They lit a fire under me, pushed me to dig deeper, to ask questions, to take control. And in doing so, they gave me something they never intended to: freedom. The lake is still and beautiful again, not because someone else says it's allowed, but because I say so. And trust me, it's never felt sweeter to cast a line than it does now, knowing I earned this peace, every inch of it. As for what's next, well, I'm thinking about organizing a little fishing tournament next weekend. Nothing fancy, just a few folks, some snacks, maybe a trophy for the biggest catch. Entrance fee, just one thing: absolutely no HOA members allowed. Hey, some rules are worth enforcing.